We begin the Gemara today on Daf Pezayin Amud Aleph after the Mishnah, about 7-8 lines down from the top of the Yamud. So one of the halachas that it said in the Mishnah is that when you have a Bas Yisrael that marries a Kohen, so she eats Truma, like her husband. What happens if she then goes and marries a Levi, or then goes and marries a Yisrael, then she can't eat Truma anymore. And if she has a son from that Levi or from that Yisrael, she for sure can't eat Truma anymore. Now what happens if those husbands die? And the children of a Levi and a Yisrael die as well? Now she can go back and eat Truma because of the son that she has from the Kayin that she was married to. So she was able to eat Truma once because of that son from that Kayin. Then she was not able, because she got married to a Levi and Yisrael, she had children from them, but when they die, she can go back to eat Truma. So the Gemara is going to bring the source for this concept that she can go back. So it said in the Mishnah, Meiz Benam Levi, she had a son after. She was married to the Kayin, had a son from the Kayin. But now she had a son from a Levi. And now that son from the Levi passed away, Teichal betruma. So the Mishnah said she can eat Truma. So the question is, the Hadra Achla Mishum Bena, the fact that she can go back and eat because of the son that she has from the Kayin that's still alive, Minalan. From where do we know this? Amarav, Bas U Bas. On the pasuk, this is a pasuk where it speaks about a Bas Kayin that married a Yisrael, and then her husband, the Yisrael, dies, and she goes back to her father's house. That's a pasuk that was quoted in the Mishnah. Bas Kayin, Kisi Almana, Grusha, and she goes Vizera Einlo, she goes Bevishava Beisavia, so then she can go back to eat Truma again. So in that pasuk there's an extra vav. It says Ubas, so we darshan this to refer to a Bas Yisrael. That a Bas Yisrael that was married to a Kayin and was able to eat Truma because of her son a Kayin, even if later she was unable, because she got married to a Yisrael and she had a child from a Yisrael, but when that child dies, she can go back to eat Truma because of her son a Kayin. So the Gemara says,
if the mother was not a Kohen,
V'yilid Beisai,
and then she passed away, and then the husband passed away.
Yeah.
So now he eats
because of the son. That's learned from a pasuk V'yilid Beisai. Forgot the continuation, but V'yilid Beisai. That if you have a child which is a Kohen, you can eat Truma. That's where we learn it out from.
So why do we need another pasuk?
Because because she married someone else, and now that Kohen to eat Truma stopped. Now she's married to Yisrael, now she can't eat Truma anymore. So now the question is...
But he passed away.
True, but who says she can go back to eat Truma again? Maybe... No, but maybe... No, the son died. But even though the son died and that Yisrael husband died as well, but maybe once she can't eat Truma, she doesn't go back. Where do we find this concept that she goes back if she's a Bas Kayin? A Bas Kayin that's married to Yisrael goes back to the father's house. But here we're talking about a Bas Yisrael. A Bas Yisrael that's eating Truma because of her son. Who says that once that Kayach to eat Truma because of your son got interrupted because she got married to Yisrael, she had a child from Yisrael, who says that when that husband or that son dies, you go back? Maybe not. That's what the Gemara is saying. Ubas. Just like by a Bas Kayin we say she goes back to her father's house, so too by a Bas Yisrael, even though the Kayach of eating Truma got interrupted, she can go back to eat Truma with her son. That's the Chiddush. So the Gemara dashens... Only if the son of the Kayin is alive. Yeah, the son of the Kayin is alive.
The Levi had to pass away. And
also, correct.
Away,
Yeah.
No one left is a Kayin.
Correct. Come on. So according to who is this drasha here? Rabbi Akiva, the Darish Vavi. We're saying the drash is from the extra Vav. So this is only according to Rabbi Akiva. Says the Gemara, no. We had this a few times before. Only Rabbi Akiva is the one that darshans the Vav. So the Gemara says, Lav dafka, afilu taimer rabbanan. I can tell you that this is even the Rabbanan. Why? Kula ubas kra yiseiruhu. The whole word ubas is an extra pasuk because in the previous pasuk it says ubas kayin. So over here it would not have to say ubas kayin. It could just say kisi almana, and we would know it's speaking about ubas kayin. So the whole ubas kayin is extra, and therefore we darshan this that it goes also on a Bas Yisrael that was married to a kayin. Tani Rabbanan. We learned in the Braise another halacha here. B'chlal, regarding a Bas Kayin that was married to a Yisrael, and then she goes back to her father's house after her husband passed away. So Keshehi Chizeres, when she goes back to her father's house, Chizeres l'truma, she can go back to eat truma, but ve'en Chizeres l'chazav v'shaik. She cannot eat a chazav v'shaik, which are portions from the carbon that usually a Bas Kayin could eat. But once she was married to Yisrael, when she goes back to her father's house, she cannot eat from the chazav v'shaik. We had this before already in the Gemara. Amar Rav Chisda. So the Gemara is going to bring a few sources for this. Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Rav Ravina Bar Shila Mikro. What's the source for this? Because it says he betrumas hakachim loy seichel. She can't eat from trumas hakachim. And what do we learn from this? Bemuram min hakachim loy seichel. What comes, the portions that come from kachim, which is this chazav v'shaik, loy seichel, she can't eat. Rashi here goes through, we had this already before in the Gemara and Daf Sam B'Ches. The Gemara before explained exactly how this drasha is learned from this pasuk. This pasuk of hi betrumas hakachim is not, in the simple pshat of the pasuk, it's not talking about a bas kain that's going back to her father's house. But because it says trumas hakachim, and it doesn't just say kachim, so we darshan as well that it goes in this case. When she goes back to the father's house, and she can eat truma again, but she cannot eat the muram and hakachim, which is the chazav v'shaik. That's one source. Another source is Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Bar Avua. It says mi lechem. Pasuk says that she can go back. The pasuk that was quoted in the Mishnah. V'shava el beisavia kenureh. She goes back to her father's house like in her youth. Mi lechem avia teichel. She can eat from the bread of her father's house. So we darshan v'loy kol lechem. Not every lechem, which is prat l'chazav v'shaik. This excludes that she cannot eat from chazav v'shaik, only from the truma. Maskefla Rami Bar Chomer asked on this drasha, maybe there's a different drasha. Since it says only mi lechem, eime prat la faras nadanim. Maybe what this is saying is that if she was married and she goes back to her father's house because her husband died, now her father cannot annul her vows anymore. What's the halacha of a girl? When she's in her father's house, her father annuls her vows. When she's married, her husband is the one that has the power to annul her vows. After the husband dies, she goes back to the father's house to annul his vows? No. Maybe that's what the pasuk is coming to say, that the father can't annul her vows anymore. Amar Rava, so Rava says, for that we don't need any pasuk. We have a brayse, the Tana de Rabbi Shmuel, he already said that we know this. How do we know this? The Tana de Rabbi Shmuel, he said, there's a pasuk regarding these nedarim. The neder almana ugrusha yakum alel. The neder of an almana and a grusha, so it yakum alel, it remains with her. Nobody could annul the vows of an almana and a grusha. Not the husband, she's not married to him anymore, and not the father, because she already left his house. So what is this pasuk saying here? Ma tamid loima, what's the pasuk coming to teach me? V'haloi moitza miklal av u'moitza miklal bal. Isn't it obvious? She left her father's house, she got married already, but now she left her husband because the husband died or divorced her. So what you see in this brayse is, the Gemara is saying it's obvious once a girl leaves her father's house, she never returns back into her father's possession that he could annul her vows. That's obvious. So what is this pasuk coming to teach me? What happens if it's sort of a case in between? What does it mean, a case in between? The father gave over his daughter to a shliach of the husband to bring her to the husband. A shliach of the father gave over the daughter to a shliach of the husband to go to bring her to his house to be married to him. And what happened? On the way, so the husband passed away, or the husband changed his mind and decided to divorce her. So what happened? The point is, she already left her father's house because she was given over to the shliach to drive her, to bring her to the husband's house, but she never arrived to the husband's house though. So this is sort of a case of in between. So what do I say regarding this girl? Beisavia shalzu, is she still part of the father's house because she'd never arrived to her husband's house? Or maybe I say that no, she already left her father's house. She was given over to the shliach of the husband. So then she's already in the husband's possession. That's the question. It's somewhere right in between. So that's the pasuk that we quoted before. Neder almana grusha yakum alel. That pasuk is coming to say, once the father gave her over to the shliach of the husband to bring her to his house, so she left the father's house, he can't annul any of her vows. That's what that pasuk is teaching me. So the point is, we don't need an extra pasuk here to teach me that once she leaves the father's house, that he doesn't annul her vows anymore. Going back to what we're talking about before, a bas kayin that goes back to her father's house after her husband, which is a Yisrael, dies, but she could only eat trumah, but not a portion from the karbanis. So Rav Safra has another drasha. Rav Safra mi lechem aviyah teichel. It says she eats from the bread. Lechem, that's bread. Bread is from the grain, from truma, but v'loy basa, not meat from the carbon. Rav Papa says another drasha. Milechem avia teichal. She eats from the bread of her father's house. Lechem hakoni la avia. This means bread that's owned by the father. Truma is owned by the father. Prat l'chazav v'shaik. So this excludes the portions of the carbon. The mishulchan gavaya kazachu. Her father, the Kayin, from where does he have these karbanis? It doesn't belong to him. He takes it from the table, from the mizbeach, from the Beis HaMikdash. So that she can't eat. The Rava Amar, final drasha, the Gemara says, Rava says, the pasuk says, V'schazeya tnufa, v'sheika truma, toichlu ata uvnesecha itcha. This is the pasuk where it says the source that a Kayin that gets the chaz of a sheik, so he eats it himself, he can give it to his family, to his children, to his son and his daughter. But the last word in the pasuk, it says itcha. What is that last word doing there? Itach, or it's read itach. B'zman she'itach. Only if your family, your daughter, that was always with you. Not if she left and she's returning. Once she's left and she's returning, she's not itach anymore. She can't eat from these karbanas. Now the Gemara says another halacha regarding this. Amar Avada Barave, Tani, we learned in the Braise, when she returns to her father's house after her husband died, this is the Bas Kayin returning to her father's house. Chezeres l'trumus, like we just said, she returns for truma to eat, but v'ene chezeres l'chazav v'shaik, she can't eat the portions of the karbanis. Now the new halacha here, b'shvil b'na, but if she's returning to eat truma because of her son, which is a kayin, chezeres af l'chazav v'shaik. So then she actually could get a portion of the karbanis from her son. So over here she actually has an advantage. It's an interesting thing. Here we're talking about a Bas Yisrael. A Bas Yisrael that was married to a Kayin and has a son of Kayin. So this Bas Yisrael, because of her son of Kayin, even if she later was married to someone else, but if that person died or the son from that person died, and she's going back to her son that's a Kayin, she will be able to eat from Karbanis. So also Rav Mordechai Rav Mordechai said over this halacha to Rav Ashi, Amar, and he said, from where are you learning out B'chlal that a Bas Yisrael could go back to eat truma from her son, which is a kayin, like we started off the Gemara. Huh? Both truma and chaz v'shayk. Or b'chlal. The Gemara is now saying, from where do we b'chlal know that a Bas Yisrael goes back to her son a kayin if she was married to a Yisrael, or she had a son of Yisrael, that husband of Yisrael died, or that son Yisrael died. She goes back to her son to eat truma with him. From where do we know this? Mi'u bas. We know it from the pasuk of, like we said before, the extra word, ubas kayin. So if so, mi adifa la mina, should she be any better than the Bas Kayin herself? The Bas Kayin that goes back to her father's house could only eat truma, not chazav v'shay. A Bas Yisrael that goes back to her son to eat, you say that she could eat truma and from the chazav v'shay of the carbon. Why is she better? Answers the Gemara, she is better because Hasam ksivi miyuti. We just brought before many different exclusions that we see from the pasuk that a Bas Kayin that goes back to her father's house does not eat chazav v'shay. Hachalek ksivi miyuti. Regarding the Bas Yisrael that goes back to her son to eat truma with him, we don't apply any of those miyutim, so therefore she can eat from the chazav v'shay as well. Bas Kayin shenisis li Yisrael v'chulu. So it said in the Mishnah, Bas Kayin that's married to Yisrael can't eat truma. But then, if her husband, Yisrael, passes away, she goes back to her father's house. But not always could she go back to her father's house. So here the mother brings a braise. In certain cases, we had this also before already in the Masechta, that she can't go back to her father's house. So Tana Rabbanan, we learned, V'shava Beisaviyah, when it says in the pasuk, a Bas Kayin that was married to Yisrael, and then he died, she goes back to the father's house. And she could eat truma there. Not always though. Prat l'shemeres yavam. If she did not have children with her husband and she's waiting for Yibum, so she can't go back to her father's house. So because she's not returning, she's waiting for a Yavam. Kin ureha, the pasuk there says she goes back like her youth. Prat lo muberes. If she's pregnant, she's not going back like her youth. She's not pregnant. So now the Gemara asks, why do I need a pasuk for this? Regarding a case when she's pregnant that she does not go back to her father's house. Vahaloi dinhu. Seemingly, this would be a kal v'chaimer from the mitzvah of Yibum. Why? Oma b'makoim shalei asa vlad min harishayin kevlad min hasheni lepaitra min Yibum. What's the halacha by Yibum? If a woman was married to Reuven and she had children with Reuven, and then now she's married to Shimon and she does not have children with Shimon, the fact that she previously had children with Reuven is relevant to her current marriage with Shimon? No. Even though before she had children, if now she does not have children, she's going to have Yibum from the second marriage. So the Vlad of the Rishain of the first marriage in no way helps her to pater her from the yibum now when she does not have children from the second marriage. Right? But nevertheless, asa ibur kiyalud. But by a yevama, if she's pregnant from this marriage now, even if she didn't give birth yet, but the pregnancy will pater her from yibum. So if so, Mokaim, now coming back over here, benegeh to a bas kohen. Over here, what's the halach of a bas kohen? Mokaim she'asa vlad min harishayin, kivlad min hasheni, lepaisla min hatruma. When you have a bas kohen, and she was married to a Yisrael, and from the first Yisrael she married, she had children. From the second Yisrael she married, she did not have children. It doesn't matter if she didn't have children from the second husband. If she has children from the first husband, she can't go back to her father's house. That passes her from Truma. So over here, where I see that the first husband passes her from Truma, even if from the second husband she did not have any children, so for sure, Ein Adin, Shanasa Uber Kiyalit. So it's self-understood that I would say that if she got married and she became pregnant, that she can't go back to her father's house to eat Truma. So what do I need a pasuk for? So the Gemara says, Loi, I have a refutation to this Kal V'Chomer. Why? Mali asa ibur kiyalud li'inyan yibum. You know why? By yibum, we say that the woman that's pregnant is like she already gave birth, and therefore there's no mitzvah of yibum anymore. You know why that is? Because shaharei asa mesim kachayim. Over there you find another halacha which you don't find regarding truma, and that is that a child that she had that passed away is the same like a child that's still alive. A woman that gave birth and she had already a child, there's no yibum anymore, even if that child passed away. So that since I see that mesim is kachayim, I say also that if she's pregnant, it's like she gave birth already. But on the other hand, over here coming back to the bas kohen, nase uber kiyalul in truma. How would you say over here that I compare a woman that's pregnant to a woman that already gave birth regarding truma? Shalei asa mesim kachayim. Over here, a child that passed away is not the same as a child that's alive. Once the child passes away, she can go back to eat truma. It's not like the child is still alive. So you can't compare the two. Talmud Loimar, Kinureh, that's why we need the pasuk Kinureh to teach me Prat Lemu'beres, that if she's pregnant, she cannot go back to eat truma. So now the Gemara explains, Ve'itztrach lemichtav, the Bach adds in over here, just a second. Ve'itztrach lemichtav Kinureha. Now we need the pasuk when it talks about this bas kohen going back to her father's house. So it says Kinureh, she goes back like in her youth. And that is l'mu'ute mu'beres, to exclude if she's pregnant, so she's not like in her youth. So we need the pasuk to say that. And also v'itztach l'michta v'zerein lo. And the pasuk is also saying that she has no children. She's going back to her father's house without children. Why does it have to say both? That she's like in her youth and that she has no children. So the Gemara explains these kasar rachman v'zerein lo. If it would just say that she has no children, so I would say as follows: meikar achad gufa. Before, when she was in her father's house, she was one person, one body. And v'hashta trei gufi. Now she has children, so it's her and her son. So she has children, that's why she can't eat truma. Avol me'oberes, but if she's pregnant, maybe would say she could still eat truma. The me'kar achad gufa, when she was in her father's house, she was one body. V'hashta chad gufa. When she's still pregnant, she's still one person. She doesn't have a son yet. So maybe I would say she goes back and eats truma. Tzricha, that's why I need the pasuk to say that she does not kinu ureha. She's not anymore like in her youth. She's pregnant, so therefore she can't go eat truma. And v'ikasav rachmane mu'uberes, if it would say the word kinu ureha to say that once she's pregnant she cannot go back to eat truma. So here I would say different. I would say the meikare gufa srika. When she was in her father's house, she was an empty body, so therefore she can eat truma. And v'hashta gufa malya. Now her body is full. Now she's pregnant, so therefore she cannot eat truma. Aval zera ein lo the meikara gufas rike v'hashta gufas rike ein maloi. But if she had children, so I would say maybe she herself, once she has a child, she herself is the same body. Once she gave birth, the person she was before, which is an empty body, and the person that she's now is the same. So therefore I would say maybe she should eat truma. Therefore tzriche, therefore I need the pasuk of zera ein lo to teach me once she has a son, she cannot go back to eat truma in her father's house. Now there's the siman for the next piece of the Gemara here. Siman, amalei, loy nasa maseh b'misa, nasa v'loy nasa b'vlad yavam, v'truma siman. Okay, so the siman for the questions that the Gemara is going to ask over here. Basically, the Gemara is going to discuss two of the halachas that we just said now. There's one concept of mesim kachayim, a child that's born. If that child passes away, does it matter? Do we say that the child that passed away is the same like if the child was still alive or not? So what's the halacha that we just said? Regarding truma, they're not the same. Only if the child is alive does it hold her back from eating truma, not if the child passed away. By yavam, if she had a child, even if he passed away, the child that passes away is the same. That's one thing the Gemara is going to discuss. And the Gemara will try to understand what's the difference between the mitzvah of yibum and the mitzvah and the ability to eat truma. And there's another halacha we just discussed before, of Vlad min Arishain and Vlad min Asheni. If she was married once and married a second time, she had a child from the first marriage, does that have any bearing on the second marriage? She did not have a child from the second marriage. What's the halacha by yibum? If you have a child from the first marriage, it makes no difference for the second marriage. What's the halacha by truma? If this bas kohen gets married once and gets married twice, if she had a child from the first marriage, it does have a bearing on the second marriage. She can't go back anymore to eat truma. So the Gemara here is going to ask, how do we know to define the halachas this way? So Amalei Rav Yehuda midiskarta l'rava. Lo nasa mesim kachayim linin yibum. Maybe regarding Yibum, even if she had a child, but that child passed away, and so we should not compare a child that she has that's alive to a child that passed away. Why? And I'll make the following kavachaymer. When it comes to truma, she was married once, she was married a second time. She only had a child from the first marriage and not from the second. It pastels her from truma. And that's more stringent here. But nevertheless, over there by truma, I don't compare a child that passed away to a child that's alive. So if so, in a play regarding yibum, I'm more lenient. I say that the child that she had of a previous marriage has no bearing on the current marriage now. So ein adin, for sure I should be lenient and say that the child that passed away is not the same as a child that's still alive. And what that would mean is, a woman that had a child, so even if while the child is alive, there's no mitzvah of yibum, but once that child passes away, maybe now there should be a mitzvah of yibum. That's the kavachaymer. Talmud Leimas, the Gemara brings a very interesting pasuk to say that we can't say this. The Torah says, the ways of Torah are pleasant, and the pathways of Torah are peaceful. So Rashi explains, what does the Gemara mean by this? Imagine a woman that passes away without any children, she passes away and she does have a child, so there's no mitzvah of yibum. She can go get married. She gets married, happily ever after. Now all of a sudden, the child she had from a previous marriage passes away. Now all of a sudden, she does have the mitzvah of yibum. She's going to have to leave her husband and go back to do the mitzvah of yibum. That's going to be very, very uncomfortable. She was already happily married, and now she has to leave and go back to do yibum. So therefore, this is not pleasant, this is not peaceful, so it can't be that there's such a halacha. Once there's a heter for her to go get married, so then even if that child passes away, there's no mitzvah of yibum anymore. The Gemara continues, now maybe we should consider a child that passed away to be like a child that's still alive regarding truma. That she should not be able to go back to her father's house to eat truma with the following kavachaymer. Now the Gemara is using all the same svaras in this kavachaymer, but it's reversing it. If I say that the child from a first marriage is not relevant to the child of a second marriage regarding yibum, but over there asa mesim kachayim, it does consider a child that passed away like a child which is alive. Regarding truma, the child of a previous marriage does have a bearing now that you will be possible from truma. So for sure I should say, for sure I should say that a child that passed away has a bearing as well, that it will pater her, it will not allow her, that is, to eat truma. So how do I know that once a child passes away, she can go back to eat truma? The answer is, well, the pasuk says that if she has no children, she can go back to eat truma. Once the child passes away, she has no children anymore. Another question the Gemara asks. Now the Gemara is going to discuss the halacha of Vlad min Arishin. V'nas of Vlad min Arishin k'Vlad min Asheni li'inyan yibo mikavachaymer. I should say, if she was married once before and she had children from a previous marriage, that should have a bearing on her marriage now of her husband regarding yibum, that she should be pater from yibum. Again, mikavachaymer. And here the Gemara reverses the kavachaymer. When it comes to truma, and a child that passed away is not the same like a child that's alive. Also Vlad min Arisha and Vlad min Asheni. hasheni, but nevertheless the child of a previous marriage is like a child from this marriage now. Mokim sha'asa mesim kachayim linyan yibum. Regarding yibum, where a child that's alive and a child that passed away is the same thing. It patters her from yibum. So for sure, any din shanasa vladman arishin kavladman hasheni. If she had a child from a previous marriage, it should be equivalent to her having a child now. Talmud Laima. So the Gemara answers, no, but you can't say that because it says uven ein loy. When does the mitzvah of Yibum apply? If you have no children from this marriage. From this marriage, you have no children. Doesn't matter if you have children from the previous marriage. The last point the Gemara asks, we should not consider a child from a previous marriage to be relevant regarding Truma if she now is married and she has no children, from a Kavachaymer from the mitzvah of Yibum. If when it comes to the mitzvah of Yibum, so over there, we compare Mason to Chayim, and it patters her from Yibum. But nevertheless, so the child that she had from a previous marriage does not matter, does not patter her from Yibum. So regarding Truma, a child that's not alive does not hold her back from eating Truma. So for sure we should also say that a child from a previous marriage should not be considered to be like a child from this marriage. Then she should be able to go and eat Truma. Talmud Laima, the pasuk says, Ein law, that she has no children, v'hayesh la. If she has a child from a previous marriage, how could she go back to her father's house? Even though she doesn't have a child from this marriage, but she has a child from a previous marriage. And therefore she cannot go back to eat Truma. Hadran aloch yesh mutaros. This is the conclusion of the 9th Perek of Masechta Yevamos. Okay, we begin a new Perek, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, the Gemara here. We'll begin speaking about a woman, her husband passed away overseas. Let's see. A woman, her husband traveled overseas, and they came and told her, Meis Bailech, your husband died. Says the Gemara will explain who came and told her, even though it uses a plural term, but the Gemara proves that this means an Eid Echad. There was just one witness that said testimony that her husband passed away. Vinisis, based on the words of this one witness, she went and got remarried. Navachakach, what happens? Babayla, her husband that supposedly passed away, shows up, and now she's remarried. So what happens? Obviously, she was an Eshes Ish. The second marriage is really not a good marriage at all. So the halacha is Teitze mizeh umizeh. She has to leave her second husband, but the chiddush here is she even has to leave her first husband. Even though you may think the second marriage was obviously illegitimate. But the first marriage, that's a real marriage. Why should she have to leave from her first husband? So Rashi says the reason is because she relied on one aid to get married. Usually the reason why we allow a woman to rely on one aid to get married, even though we can't rely usually on one aid, is because Isha Daike or Minseve. We'll see later in the Masechta about this. That means we rely on her to make her investigation. And therefore, over here, obviously, she didn't make a proper investigation. So she can't come and say, this that I got remarried is not my fault at all, it's an einus. It's not exactly an einus. There was only one aid, and she should have made a proper investigation. Since she didn't, so therefore she has to leave her first husband. She's not an einus. And also, tzricha get mizeh mizeh. She's going to need a get from both the first husband and the second husband. Even though l'chayda from the second husband, she shouldn't need a get. She wasn't really married to him. The Gemara will explain. And also, vein l'ksuba, she gets l'ksuba money. V'loy peiris, none of the peiris that the husband ate. She doesn't have to get reimbursed. V'loy mezainis, no sustenance from any of these husbands. V'loy balois, any clothing that she brought in that are worn out, she doesn't receive them. Loy alzeh, v'loy alzeh, not from her first husband and not from the second. If she took any of these, tachse, she has to give it back. And v'havlad mamzer mizeh. A child that's born will be a mamzer. So Rashi explains the child from the second marriage is obviously a mamzer. She was an Eshes Ish. But even the child from the first marriage, if she goes back to her first husband after he showed up and she continues living with him and she has a child, Minat Torah, that child won't be a mamzer. That's the real marriage. Minat Torah will not be a mamzer because that's really the real marriage. But the Mishnah says, Midrabanon, they will geyser that even the child from the first marriage should also be a mamzer. And not the husband, if he's a kayin from the first marriage or the second marriage, could be metameter. And not the first husband or the second husband have the merit to get loy b'mitziyasa, not any of her lost items that she finds. Usually a husband gets the mitziyah that a woman finds, but not here. Not any of her income, which would usually go to the husband. So here, none of them get any of her income. Usually the husband has the power to annul her vows, and not here. Haisa Bas Yisrael. If this woman was a Bas Yisrael, so now Nifsala Min HaKahuna, because of this incident that she got remarried, and now she's going to be apostle to a Kayin. She's considered to be a Zaina. She got remarried as an Eishes Ish. O Vas Levi Min HaMaiser. A Bas Levi will be apostle of eating Maiser, or Bas Kayin Min Truma, and a Bas Kayin will be apostle of eating Truma. This is Exerim Rabbanon. And also the Mishnah concludes, Ve'ein Yershin Shalzeh, Ve'yershin Shalzeh, Yershin es Ksubasa. Any Yershin she has from the first marriage or the second marriage do not get her Ksuba. So Rashi immediately says, the Gemara will ask, we just said a moment ago, there's no Ksuba here, B'chlal. So why are we saying that nobody inherits her Ksuba? The Gemara will explain. Ve'emeisu achav shalzeh, v'achav shalzeh. Now if any of these husbands die, achav shalzeh, v'achav shalzeh, chaltzin v'loy miyabim. So then there's only chalitza and no yibam. For the first husband, you obviously have to do chalitza, because that was the real marriage, and the Rabbanan are geyser not to do yibum. Second marriage, there's really no reason to do any chalitza at all. It's not even a good marriage, b'chlal. She was an Eishes Ish, but the Chachamim were geyser to do chalitza as well. So that's the Mishnah here. Now, if you counted all the different things that it just said here regarding this case, there are in all 16 different halachas that it said regarding this case here. Now the Gemara is going to bring a few different Tanaim that argue on some of these halachas that we just said. Rabbi Yosi says, Ksubas al nichse bayla arisha. She does get a ksuba from her first husband. So that's one thing that Rabbi Yosi argued with. Rabbi Laza says, the first husband will get her lost items she find, will get her income, and does have the power to annul her vows. Rab Shimon says, that from the first marriage, so the brothers, if the husband dies now, so now the brothers can do yibum or chalitza and peteres tzarasa. It'll pater a second wife. So he holds that there is full yibum possible for the first marriage. And ve'ein avlad mimenu mamzer. And that the child from the first husband will not be a mamzer. Now the Mishnah begins a new thing. So until here the Mishnah was speaking about a woman that got remarried based on the words of an Eid Echad that told her that her husband died. Now, if she gets married without the permission of Bezdin. Why does it mean without the permission of Bezdin? Why didn't she go to Bezdin? Because two witnesses came and said that her husband passed away. If there are two witnesses, she doesn't have to go to Bezdin. Two witnesses are telling this to me, so why should I go to Bezdin? Then, once she's relying on two witnesses, Muteres lachzer loy, she'll be allowed to go back to her first husband. Why? So Rashi explains, because here she's an oinus. Or to some extent, she can say, I'm an oinus. I had no reason to make any investigation of my own. I had two witnesses. When there's one witness saying her husband passed away, we rely on her to make an investigation. But if there's two witnesses, so then she has no reason to make any investigation. So therefore, she's totally an oinus. She can go back to her husband. The truth is, she's not totally an oinus, but to some extent, as we'll see in a moment here. Now, Nisis Alpi Bezdin, going back to what we said before, if she only got remarried based on Bezdin, what does it mean based on Bezdin? Because there was only an Eid Echad, and therefore she went to Bezdin to ask Bezdin if she's allowed to get married or not, and the Bezdin said that she can go and get remarried. So then now, if she got remarried and her husband shows up, she has to leave upetura min hakarbin, and she does not bring a carbon at all. So she does not bring a carbon because Rashi says the reason is because Bezdin told her to do this. The halacha is when an individual does something based on what Bezdin told her, you put her from a carbon. A carbon chatas. She's an Eishes Ish that b'sheigig, you would think b'sheigig she went and had a relationship with someone else. So she should bring a carbon chatas, but she's potter because she did it according to Bezdin. If she did not get married according to Bezdin, rather she got remarried that is, according to two witnesses that told her that her husband passed away, then Teitze, if her husband shows up, she's going to have to leave. She will be chayev in a carbon. So over here, Rashi points out, you see, that even though before we said she's an oinus when she got remarried, but she's not fully an oinus. It's not fully an oinus. She still could have made her own investigations. She's called a sheigig, and therefore she'll have to bring a carbon. So the Mishnah concludes, Yafe koyach Bezdin shepaitra min carbon. The power of Bezdin is good that it paters her from a carbon. Once the Bezdin told her she can do this, at least it paters her from a carbon. Now, another thing though, she can't rely on the Bezdin fully. Hayrua Bezdin linase, if Bezdin says to her, you can go and get remarried. And v'holcha, she didn't get remarried. And instead what she did is, v'kilkala. She went and was mizana with someone. She had a relation with someone, not remarried. then chayeves b'karbon. She can't say, oh, the Bezdin told me I'm allowed to do this. If Bezdin told you can get remarried, but you can't just go have a relation with anybody, then she's going to have to bring a carbon of her own. They only allowed her to go and get remarried. Okay, so now the Gemara will explain the pshat of the Reish of the Mishnah. As I pointed out, the pshat over here is, in the beginning of the Mishnah, we're talking about a woman that got remarried based on the words of one witness. Now, Midik Tani Seife, in the Seife of the Mishnah it said, and this is Shalei B'Rishus Bezdin. She got married without even going to Bezdin at all. Shalei B'Rishus, that is, without Bezdin. Muteres Lachzaloi, then she can go back to her first husband. Because she relied on two witnesses. She's considered to be an Einus. So now, Shalei B'Rishus Bezdin, what does it mean when it says in the Mishnah without the permission of Bezdin? Ela B'Eidim. The reason is because she's relying on Eidim. So now, Meklal, from this I understand, the Reisha B'Rishus Bezdin. In the Reisha of the Mishnah, when it says that she got married, what does it mean? It was with Bezdin's permission, but it was Ubeid Echad. She was relying on one witness. Over there we say that she should have made an investigation on her own, even though Bezdin's giving her a shos, but it's because Bezdin is relying on her to make an investigation on her own. So now, Alma, what do I see from our Mishnah? Eid Echad Neman, regarding such a case, and Eid Echad is believed. And Eid Echad has, we trust the words of an Eid Echad regarding this kind of an Isser. Now this next piece of Gemara here is going to focus on the source, from where do we see the concept that sometimes we trust the word of an Eid Echad regarding Isurim. And Gemara brings first another Mishnah where we see a similar thing. Tnan Nami, we have another Mishnah in the Masechta here. Hochzuku liyos masiin, that the Chachamim said that you can marry off a woman that doesn't know if her husband passed away or not, even if it's an aid mipi aid. It's just one aid, and one aid that heard something from another aid, even if it's not directly. And also isha mipi isha, one woman that heard from another woman that her husband passed away. Isha mipi eved, a woman repeating something in the name of a eved, or mipi shivcha or a shivcha. So Alma, again we see over here, aid echad mehemen. We can trust the words of an Eid Echad. Now there's another case. Now this is unrelated to this situation here, when we don't know if a woman's husband passed away, but Bechlal, B'Nigeya, to all Isurim. So we have a Mishnah that tells us that regarding all Isurim, we trust an Eid Echad. We learned also Eid Echad, Eimer, a Eid comes and says, Achalta Chelev, that you ate Chelev. What you ate is fats. And he says, no, it was not fats, I did not eat this. Potter. So he's going to be potter from a carbon. Now, Taima, why is he potter from a carbon if he contradicts the word of the Eid Echad? Taima, the reason is, that's only because he contradicts the word of the Eid Echad, and he said, I did not eat. So then he does not have to accept what the Eid Echad said. Ha-ishtik. But if he would be quiet and he would not accept the words of the Eid Echad, mehamin, he would be believed. So again, Alma, I see from here, Eid Echad Mehemen, that Eid Echad is believed. So the question is, from where do I know that an Eid Echad is believed? I mean, this is a halacha that we rely on every single day of our life. If you have your wife that's cooking in the kitchen on her own, or if you have a mashgiach that's a mashgiach kashrus, do you need to have always two mashgiachim that go together to be able to tell you that what's there is done is kosher? No, you can rely on one mashgiach, on one person, an isha as well. So we see that when it comes to Yisurim, you don't need two witnesses. You only have one person and you rely on that. So what's the source when that we rely on this? Okay, the next piece of Gemara, it's going to continue in the next Amud, so we'll continue with Shem tomorrow to see the answer to this question.